Well, thank you so much for coming out on what hopefully was not too rainy a night for you. My name is Dagmar Painter. For those of you who haven't been to the gallery before, I'm the gallery curator. And it is my great privilege to be able to present the artwork of Athir Shayota this evening. And I'm not going to give a long talk. I really want to give them as much chance as possible to talk to you about the allegorical still lifes that you've seen. But I just want to introduce not only Athir, who will talk about his ideas for the paintings. Athir is a New York-based painter. He's Iraqi. He's exhibited in many institutions and galleries, including the Arab American National Museum, Cooper Union, Cathedral of St. John the Divine, all over. And his work has been featured and reviewed in many, many publications, including the New York Times and Bidun. In dialogue with him is Maymanah Farhat, who also happens to be his wife, and the mother of the subject of the painter's daughter painting, who is sitting in the front row. Yeah. And there's a baby too. The baby will get in the next painting, I think.
Next show.
And Maymanah has a resume far too long for me to go into in any great detail, but she is an amazing writer and journalist and art historian and editor of publications and a curatorial advisor to the Arab American National Museum. And she's lectured at universities and galleries throughout the United States. And the part that I think is incredibly cool, in 2014, she was listed among Foreign Policy's 100 leading global thinkers. So without further ado, I will turn the dialogue over to Athir and Maymanah.
Thank you all for coming tonight. It's really nice to see all your lovely faces. Oh, I'm kind of microphone shy, so forgive me a little bit. Just to give you a little bit of structure, Athir's going to read a statement that he wrote for the show, which I think pretty much encompasses everything that we're going to talk about. It'll be a nice introduction for all of you. And then we'll just go back and forth, and he can try to, sort of capture what the work is about, how it started. I'll give you a little bit of background, and then we'll go from there. And definitely we'll open it up for questions. So without further ado.
Okay. All right, so this is the statement that Maymanah asked me to write. She thought that maybe it's a good idea to do. Okay, the latest series of still life paintings included in this exhibition began in late November 2014. The first work, although comparatively reserved, was painted with Manet's late floral still lifes in mind. Yet the series quickly progressed to an André Rousseau-inspired methodical arrangement with the second composition. A breakup of space emerged with the placement of a toy truck when I began the third work, as I was confident enough by then. With the seventh composition, which is kind of hidden if you don't see it over there, of the Nikisi and Zapatista figures, the direction of the series shifted where the focus became the void between objects. In the 1990s, I painted a series of still lifes that included popular Iraqi dishes like dolma and mezgoof, one of which was featured in my first exhibit at the Gallery Al-Quds 9 years ago. The show's title was Athir Shayota, Iraqi Portraits. I have avoided the floral motif and still lifes in general due to the complexity and demand of the genre, which reached an apex with Cézanne. Moreover, finding a link to my concern for my homeland was difficult. The early depictions of this genre, for example, as found in ancient Egypt and Rome, relied heavily on allegory. The modernist, however, rejected it for more direct experience with an artwork. With Manet, the object is the object, and as demonstrated by Cézanne in its rearrangement of space, the aim is to question perception. All these lessons carried into the 20th century and its accumulated horrors made modernism part of its tragedy. The angst in modernity is its aesthetic allegory. Both Soutine and Beckman absorbed this and recorded suffering and alienation. Flowers are no longer flowers with the exiled existence of Beckman or of man, woman, but the artist and the condition itself. Yet I cannot see Iraqis giving up, although recently a level of pessimism has come over me. While working on these still lives, two literary examples were always on my mind. The ending to Turgenev's Fathers and Sons, which reads as follows: however passionate, however rebellious the heart that rests in a tomb, the flowers that have sprung up over it look peacefully at us with their innocent eyes. They speak to us not only of eternal repose, of that perfect repose of indifferent nature, they speak to us also of eternal reconciliation and of a life which cannot end. And an excerpt from Tolstoy's Haji Murad. It reads as follows: evidently, a cartwheel had passed over the plant, but it has risen again. Yet it stood firm and did not surrender to man, who had destroyed all its brothers around it. What vitality, I thought. Man has conquered everything and destroyed millions of plants, yet this one won't submit. Another composition is of my daughter Suha, who is now 8 years old, and it's included in this exhibit with the 10 still lives and utilizes objects from the series. Suha with her pedal car, or now I titled it The Artist's Daughter, is inspired by Daoud Zalatimo, the painter's son, which is a masterpiece of early 20th century Palestinian art. Suha was 2 when I began the painting and was sitting inside the car like Zalatimo's child. 6 years later of working and reworking the painting, she is now too big for the car and instead rests on its hood. Thank you.
So we're going to try to unpack that statement now. Athir, can you first share with us the idea for the series, how it came about?
I wonder. Okay, so Maymanah has always after me to paint different things. And here she wanted me to do a floral still life. I had brought a bouquet home. And I said, absolutely not, impossible. It cannot happen. You cannot paint flowers. There's no, like, especially in today's age. And I have tried for 25 years, 30 years, and I have not been able to. So a deal was made, and I painted the first still life.
As in, I would stop nagging if you just tried it.
And she would make my favorite dish.
Oh yeah, and I
She
would
made
make
dolma.
Yeah, I'd make his favorite his favorite dish.
So I started the painting, the first one, and started painting that early morning. And by maybe 10, 11 o'clock, I had reached something. The next day, I concluded it, and I thought, okay, most of my paintings will take 6, 7 years to finish, but here in a couple of days, I'm able to reach some poetics. Can this be repeated again? So the next weekend, I had another 3 days to work, and I was able to finish almost the second still life. By the time you get to the 8th still life, which is the one with the yellow patterned ground and purple and green flowers, 5 months it took me to finish. At that point, I had again returned to who I was. and so I finished it. And thank you, Dagmar, for being so encouraging with this show. The last 2 paintings, the 9th and 10th, came this summer as a way of completing this, at least this set of works, so thank you for that. And I finished the 9th and 10th this summer, so, but that's how it began.
The tradition of still lifes
Yes.
is, it goes all the way back to ancient times, yeah?
Right.
And that's kind of what you were talking about in your statement in terms of there being such a precedent or such a tradition that in this day and age, how do you even approach that? Not only through form and concept, but also politically, yeah? Because the age that we're living in, especially being Iraqi and from northern Iraq and everything that is happening now, how do you paint still lives in this day and age? And that's usually, that would be a question that comes up quite a bit, yeah? You're an Iraqi painter, you're living in New York, and everything's taking place. why still life specifically? Not just because I asked you to paint.
No, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have been finished with one and that would have been it. But
Right,
it
right.
developed into an entire series, and not only that, it progressed very, very quickly because there was this kind of force that came with it, yeah? And there was a concept that you've carried throughout. So can you discuss that a little bit?
Right. I mean, Godard said one does not make political films, one makes films politically. Okay, so how does one create politically? And it's not an easy thing. So form is how we do it. Artists do it. So Malevich will reconstruct, consider or take apart the whole world and put it back together through squares, red squares, black squares, and lines, and so on. So I've chosen different forms, or I have been influenced, or I have gravitated to different forms that have informed the works of that period. And always, it seemed, at least I verbalized afterwards, they've related to Iraq, or what was happening in Iraq, because one is rudely uprooted, and one cannot completely fit in. And so the subject is always that subject. It is homeland, or the concern for the people, because one carries homeland with them too. So in the beginning, during the sanctions regime, the portraits of Iraqis were very stoic, and everything was very frontal.
Wait, he's talking about his own work here.
His own work this time, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at Byzantium art, so using ideas from Byzantium. I'm looking at Van Gogh and the way he would portray the subject matter, if it be the postman or who he would be looking at. And I'm using ideas from him.
Right, and your father becomes the main subject matter.
My father and mother, but
Right.
father mainly, yeah. My father will appear in about 10 paintings. My mother is going to appear in about 8 paintings. And her meals become the subject, so mesgouf, dolma, all these Iraqi dishes will become the still lifes of that period. Right. So both of them, yeah, figured in very strongly. But the idea at all time was to project something that needed to be seen or to be known or to be, what do you call it, to be properly presented, for instance. So, which was the subject of Iraq, because you ask an American, you ask anybody Iraq, and they'll say, at that time, Saddam, really? You know, when did he become Iraq? So that's how that began. Now, as Iraq was further attacked, culminating in the 2003 destruction, and then later, I mean, you say culminating, and then it culminates one more time, and, you know, it gets worse even. The paintings and the subject matter, the Iraqi subject matter, which was presented in a Byzantium form, where the subject was completely there, not exposed in any way, but present, it started disappearing. So doorways started blocking the face, or a shadow started covering. There I was looking at different sources, from film noir, which I love, to the cinema of Robert Bresson, the French filmmaker, Pickpocket, and the rest, you know.
But those paintings that you're discussing now,
yes.
The ones where space comes into it, plays a major player in the composition in
right.
terms of conceptually sort of situating the figure, yeah?
Right.
Those came in New York after the invasion of 2003.
That's right.
Right.
So yeah, so I've moved from Detroit at this point, and I'm in New York.
Right.
And the influences change, or at least what I gravitate towards at that point, though I'm reading Tolstoy at that point, and I use the quote now, or I'm thinking about him with these floral motifs, but it is Bresson that leads me to Tolstoy. The one will always arrive at Tolstoy and the Russian literature. And it was how to utilize actual text into cinema. And I thought, how does one utilize cinema and the breakup of space? And we've discussed this before, where Bresson, they call him a Catholic filmmaker, but there was the humility of the subject never being presented. So the action is here, the camera is looking here, elsewhere. And there's a reason why he does this, you know. So I thought, how does one bring that, not to humility in any way, but to disfiguration, you might say, in Iraq? And then, so you pick the Iraqi subject matter, and Now New York comes in, the cramped space of New York is about to play a role, and a door is about to play a role, a shadow is about to play a role. And everything just to break that identity that is being broken violently by sources outside of it. So it's formalistic techniques to, at all time, stay true to the art form, to dialogue with other artists, not to allow also politics to completely take over, because one does not want to be in that milieu completely. There's at least hope in art. There's zero hope in politics, you know. So
For the DC crowd.
oh, sorry. Yes. And then then it leads to these flowers where now Iraq is completely the identity, though they are stand-ins for Iraqis. It's what do you call it? It's not there. So the face is no longer present, though Suha appears, of course, in the composition that I started many years ago.
But so let's back up a little bit. So the first series, like the first series of your work that we can identify, which was the late 80s, 90s, up until the late 90s,
Right.
were mostly of your family
That's right.
and friends, mostly Iraqis, mostly Chaldeans,
Right.
in Michigan, in Detroit, and Metro Detroit.
Right.
A number of portraits of your parents.
Yes.
And like you said, of your mother's foods and the dishes, so there were still lives there. So that's one series. The next series, we jumped to New York, and it's the early 2000s, right around the time of the invasion, right after the invasion.
Yeah.
And there are 5 paintings in that series, just to give you guys a little bit of background. And they're either self-portraits, fragmented self-portraits, yeah?
Right.
So the composition will start here, and there'll be a door blocking the view, or it'll be a torso that's cut off. And so you see this fragmentation that happens in the figures. So it's yourself and a number of other Iraqi artists
Right.
who are also in the same kind of psychic space as you are, living in New York as exiled Iraqis right after the invasion.
That's right.
If we fast forward all the way to these still lives, exactly what you were just saying, the figure is gone. But if you look at those still lives, I mean, one of them, it's still life, the one with the red kitchen table, still life
Right,
number 5. You'll see it out there.
Right, the first
It was right around the time of Easter, so the bouquet they're like Easter lilies, and then they're the palms that are that come out. But if you look at it, and if you know it, the reference, which would be the Freedom Square in Baghdad that was designed by Jawad Salim, and you see the breakup of space that happens there and the lines that happen, and that is actually a frieze that has figures, and the figures are breaking away, and in a certain section of the frieze, there are prison bars, and then someone else comes and frees the prisoners, and it's just like, it's really dynamic, and everything just comes out. And that definitely is there in that painting.
Right. It's in the consciousness of every Iraqi.
Every Iraqi. I mean, that's just a point of
That's
reference.
where you are.
Right.
If you're in Baghdad, you're looking at it, you know it.
Right.
Right. And I'm not thinking about it, you might say, consciously. Of
Right.
course, afterwards, I recognize. I see where some of these ideas come and the different ideas that are being carried.
But with this is the first time that you have an entire series, with the exception of Suha's painting,
Yeah.
where there are no figures whatsoever.
Right.
And not only that, the space, if we talk about New York space, which is very identifiable, that just crammed, living in shoeboxes, but the New York space and even the psychic space of post-invasion Iraq is there to such an extreme, though, yeah? Because you can enter those paintings, but your space is very limited. As the viewer, there's one where the yellow background is on the bottom and then the purple flowers, but the bouquet is right at the front edge of the picture plane, yeah? So it's not like you're allowed to go into that space. What is it about that specifically for you that communicates where we're at now in terms of exactly what you were saying? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, right. But you said it. I think you answered it. So, I mean, for different reasons, the space became that, not in that painting, but in late 1800s with Cézanne, to actually take away the lie, you might say, of painting. Right? So Cézanne, the line begins here, and then there's an object, and it continues elsewhere. But he was trying to flatten the space, to correct the space, you might say, of the painting, to say that this is an artifice, an art object, and not any illusionistic space that leads to anything but this art object, which is the paint, the canvas, and of course with the object that is depicted. So there was the revolution that is Cézanne is the removal of the lie, but he's of course more than that. His poetics, you know, different in the Byzantium and the pre-Renaissance, where of course they were aware that they were doing what they were doing, but not to the extent that it's done later consciously, of course. And Islamic art is different because Islamic art at all time they're aware of it and they're doing it, and you know, and it's incredible. But in the West, and since you know, I was trained in the West and working through these matters. From it, from Cézanne, of course, as you, I mean, to talk about it more, maybe to get to Beckman.
Get to your paintings.
Right.
We could
I'm
go,
trying to
this could be all
I
night.
don't want to bore you. But so anyway, maybe we'll take questions in a minute. It's 7:24. Yeah. So
but you get an idea of everything that goes into these paintings. Yeah. I mean, how informed that these paintings are in terms of working within the history of painting, the history of still lifes, the history of modernism and what modernism means, where form and concept, or you know, even if it's an everyday object like a still life or a chair or apples, it has a heavier kind of meaning to it. Yeah, it's not. It goes beyond the idea of just representation and something other, and that's definitely what these still lifes
totally.
are
And
doing.
anyone that, yeah, and not just of course me, but everybody is working in those exact. I mean, and everyone is of their time, if they're of their time properly. I mean, you could be of your time in your corporate artist, but you know, if you are actually concerned about things that should be concerned about, you know, so. Definitely, and Beckman and the rest. I mean, Soutine is going to come and he's going to do the same thing, using ideas of Cézanne and all of that. But yes, of course, every work is very rounded if it's done properly.
Okay, here's a question. I'll just play devil's advocate for you. All the work is about Iraq. I mean, one says, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, but you're also dealing with form and technique and everything like that. Do you consider yourself an American painter?
Yeah, of course. But I mean, so a person wrote about my work, and he identified the umbrella painting as a
leading Iraqi writer, by the way.
Yeah, so a very nice essay where he said that painting is of Baghdadi heat on this street in Baghdad, and it's my most New York painting.
Yeah.
But so. And the world is small. Of course, I'm a New Yorker, but I use New York, I think, more than I am. Oh, yes, I am an American painter because I actually love American painting. So if that's, you know, and I paint in America.
And you're
all
trained
of that.
here.
And I was trained here, and the tradition I love. I mean, I love American modernism, and I love, you know, and there's Alex Katz, who I love, and there's Philip Pearlstein with his objects. So both I love.
Alice Neal.
You know, Alice Neal is everywhere in my work, especially the portraits of Maymanah, which are online, one can see. Yeah, of course. So I'm completely, you know, and they were, you know. Right. So it's yes, yeah, and I'm Iraqi too. You know, I mean, I'm very friendly. I think every artist is everything if they open their eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. The world belongs to us.